I need to pause here for a moment. For 34 years, I investigated insurance fraud for Pacific Northwest Mutual. I've seen every con, every scheme, every carefully crafted lie designed to separate people from their money. I learned to spot the tells, the inconsistencies, the subtle shifts in behavior that signal deception. I built a career on my ability to see through elaborate fabrications, but I never thought I'd need those skills at home. My name is Vincent Mercer, and I'm 62 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, in a craftsman house my wife Celeste and I bought 18 years ago when we got married. It was both our second marriages. We were older, supposedly wiser, determined not to repeat past mistakes. We had a good life together, comfortable, stable, or so I believed. I retired 3 years ago with a solid pension and carefully managed investments. Celeste was 56, still working as an elementary school librarian, though she planned to retire in another year. We had simple pleasures: Saturday morning farmers markets, evening walks along the Willamette River, Sunday dinners with my daughter Elise from my first marriage. We weren't wealthy, but we were secure. We'd worked hard for that security. The first sign came on a Tuesday evening in March. I remember, because it was the day after our anniversary. We'd celebrated the night before at our favorite Italian place. Nothing fancy, just comfortable, familiar. The next evening, I was in my office organizing tax documents when Celeste came home 2 hours later than usual. "Sorry I'm late," she said, slightly breathless. I stopped by a financial planning seminar at the library. Really interesting stuff about maximizing retirement income. I looked up from the 1,099 forms spread across my desk. "We have a financial advisor, honey. Robert's been managing our portfolio for 8 years. I know. She waved her hand dismissively. But this woman, Dominique Laurent, she had some fascinating perspectives. Did you know we might be leaving significant money on the table with our current strategy? Something tightened in my chest. In my years investigating fraud, I'd learned that the phrase leaving money on the table was almost always a red flag. But this was my wife. I pushed the feeling down. "We're doing fine," I said gently. "Our returns have been solid." "Sure, but solid isn't optimal." Her eyes had a strange brightness. Dominique explained how couples in our age bracket often have hidden opportunities in their portfolios. She offered to do a free, comprehensive review. "Free?" The investigator in me stirred. "What's her compensation structure?" Celeste laughed, but it sounded forced. "Vincent, not everyone is running a scam. She works on commission, sure, but she's helping people." She showed me testimonials from clients who increased their retirement income by 30, even 40%. Testimonials. Another red flag. Real financial advisors don't typically do cold presentations at public libraries. "What firm does she work with?" I asked. "Laurent Financial Solutions." "She's independent, which means she can offer more personalized service than those big corporate firms." I made a mental note to look into Laurent Financial Solutions, but I didn't want to come across as paranoid or controlling. Celeste had always been smart with money. She'd managed the household finances throughout our marriage, paid our bills on time, maintained our budget. I trusted her judgment. "Just be careful," I said. "If something sounds too good to be true—" I know, she interrupted. "You've told me 1,000 times. I'm not an idiot, Vincent." There was an edge to her voice I wasn't used to hearing. I let it drop. Over the next few weeks, Dominique Laurent's name came up more and more frequently. Celeste attended another seminar. Then she had a one-on-one consultation. She started talking about repositioning our assets and tax-advantaged vehicles and bridge strategies. The language sounded legitimate enough, but something felt off. My wife had never used that kind of financial jargon before. In April, she asked me to meet with Dominique. "Just hear her out," Celeste urged over breakfast on a rainy Saturday. "She's done a complete analysis of our situation, and she has some really compelling recommendations." I agreed, partly because I was curious about this woman who had captured my wife's attention, partly because I wanted to assess her credibility myself. We scheduled a meeting at Dominique's office for the following Thursday. The office was in a newer building in the Pearl District, all glass and exposed brick, Professional enough. The reception area had expensive-looking furniture and financial magazines fanned across a coffee table. A young receptionist smiled at us with practiced warmth. Dominique Laurent emerged from an interior office, hand extended. She was striking, probably early 40s, with dark hair pulled into an elegant twist and a tailored navy suit that screamed expensive. Her handshake was firm, her smile confident but not aggressive. "Mr. Mercer, so wonderful to finally meet you. Celeste has told me so much about you. 34 years investigating insurance fraud? Fascinating work." I noted how she'd done her homework, how she mirrored my handshake pressure, how her office had all the trappings of success, but none of the regulatory certificates or credentials I'd expect to see prominently displayed. We sat in her office, and she walked us through an impressive presentation on her laptop. Charts, graphs, projections showing how our retirement income could increase by 38% through strategic repositioning. She spoke smoothly, using just enough technical language to sound credible without being incomprehensible. She addressed my questions with what seemed like transparency, but I'd spent 3 decades spotting sophisticated fraud, and Dominique Laurent was very, very good. The tells were subtle. The way she deflected when I asked about her credentials, redirecting to her track record. The vague references to her investment strategies without specifics. The testimonials from clients with no last names and no way to verify their authenticity. The pressure, ever so gentle, to act quickly, to take advantage of a limited window for certain tax benefits. When we left, Celeste was glowing. "See? I told you she was good. What did you think?" I chose my words carefully. "She's very polished, but I'd like to do some due diligence before we make any changes. Let me look into her background, verify her credentials." Celeste's face fell. "Vincent, please don't go into investigator mode. This is our retirement, not a fraud case. Dominique is legitimate. She's helped dozens of couples." "Then verification will be easy," I said mildly. She didn't speak to me the rest of the drive home. That night, I started digging. Laurent Financial Solutions had a professional website, but it was only 8 months old. Dominique Laurent had a LinkedIn profile, claiming 15 years of experience. But when I tried to verify her previous employment, the firms either didn't exist anymore or had no record of her. Her claimed credentials, CFP, CHFC, weren't listed in any of the professional databases I checked. The address of her firm was a virtual office rental. Every instinct I'd honed over 34 years was screaming at me. This was a con, an elaborate, sophisticated con, and my wife was the mark. But how do you tell your wife of 18 years that she's being scammed without sounding paranoid, controlling, distrustful? I tried to bring it up gently the next evening. "Honey, I did some checking on Dominique Laurent. I'm having trouble verifying some of her credentials." "Oh my God, Vincent!" Celeste slammed her book down on the coffee table. "Can you just stop? Stop investigating everyone. Stop seeing criminals everywhere. This is exactly why your first marriage failed. You couldn't trust anyone." The words hit like a slap. My first marriage had ended because my ex-wife had an affair, but Celeste knew that. She'd never thrown it in my face before. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to protect us." "From what? From opportunity? From someone trying to help us?" Her voice shook. "You know what? I'm handling this. It's my retirement too. I don't need your permission." She left the room. I heard our bedroom door close with a firm click. Something had shifted. This wasn't just about financial planning anymore. This was about control, trust, our relationship. And I was losing. Over the next month, Celeste became secretive. She'd take phone calls in another room. She'd close her laptop quickly when I walked by. She started carrying her purse with her everywhere, even just moving from the living room to the kitchen. Classic signs of deception. My daughter Elise noticed during our Sunday dinner in early May. "Dad, is everything okay with you and Celeste?" she asked quietly while Celeste was in the kitchen. "She seems different." "We're working through some things," I said, which was both true and understated. "If you need to talk." Elise squeezed my hand. She was 24, working as a paralegal, sharp as hell. She'd inherited my investigative instincts. "I know, sweetheart. Thank you." After Elise left, I made a decision. I'd spent my career gathering evidence. I needed to know exactly what was happening, even if the truth destroyed my marriage. Because if Dominique Laurent was draining our accounts, I needed to stop it before we lost everything. I hired a private investigator. Jackson Cross was someone I'd worked with occasionally during fraud cases, meticulous and discreet. I gave him everything I had on Dominique Laurent and asked him to find out what she was really doing. "Give me 2 weeks," Jackson said. While I waited, I watched my wife drift further away. She was distracted during conversations, defensive when I asked simple questions about her day. The warmth that had defined our marriage for 18 years was gone, replaced by cool politeness. Then, in mid-May, I discovered the first concrete evidence. Celeste had left her laptop open while she showered. I know it was a violation of privacy. I know it was wrong. But I'd spent 3 decades investigating fraud, and every instinct was screaming at me to look. I opened her email. What I found made my hands shake. Dozens of emails from Dominique. But they weren't about investment strategies. They were personal, warm, intimate in tone, though not overtly romantic. Dominique called Celeste darling and my dear friend. She praised Celeste's intelligence, her independence, her vision for the future. She wrote about trips they could take together, places they could see, the life Celeste deserved. And woven through the warm words was the constant message. Vincent was holding Celeste back. Vincent didn't understand her potential. Vincent was trapped in his investigator mindset, seeing threats where there were only opportunities. If Celeste truly wanted to flourish in retirement, she needed to break free from Vincent's limiting influence. It was masterful manipulation. Not a love affair in the traditional sense, but an emotional affair designed to isolate my wife from her support system and make her dependent on Dominique's guidance. I kept reading, my stomach churning. There were references to accounts I didn't recognize, to transfers Celeste had already made, to a comprehensive repositioning that would happen in June. I checked our bank accounts, our joint savings. The one we'd built over 18 years was nearly empty. $283,000 gone. Transferred to something called Laurent Capital Trust. Our home equity line of credit had been opened and maxed out, $150,000. Also transferred to Laurent Capital Trust. I couldn't breathe. In 9 months, Dominique Laurent had convinced my wife to move over $400,000 into accounts I had no access to. But it got worse. I found an email from our mortgage company. One Celeste had apparently deleted, but that was still in her trash folder. Our house, the house we'd paid off 6 years ago, the house I planned to leave to Elise, had been remortgaged. $375,000. Nearly the full value. The money had been transferred to Laurent Capital Trust 3 weeks ago. Over $700,000. Most of our life savings. Our home. All in the hands of Dominique Laurent. And when I checked Laurent Capital Trust's registration, it was a shell company registered in Delaware 4 months ago. No business address, no phone number, no way to track where the money actually went. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the laptop screen, feeling like the floor had opened beneath me. In my entire career, I'd never felt this sick. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was my wife, my marriage, my life. Jackson called 2 days later. "You need to hear this," he said grimly. "Dominique Laurent isn't even her real name. She's Diane Lawrence, and she's run this exact scam in 3 other states over the past 5 years. She targets educated, upper-middle-class women in their 50s, usually married to men in law enforcement or investigative fields. She builds emotional dependence, isolates them from their spouses, convinces them to move assets into her control, then disappears. The victims are too ashamed to report it because they feel foolish for being manipulated." "How much has she taken?" I asked, though I already knew my answer. "From what I can track, about $3 million total across 11 victims. But those are just the ones I could confirm. The real number is probably higher." "Is she still in Portland?" "For now. She typically works a city for 9 to 12 months, then vanishes. Based on her pattern, you probably have less than a month before she disappears with your money." I thanked Jackson and hung up. Then I sat in my office for a long time, thinking, planning. I'd spent 34 years building cases against fraudsters. I knew how to gather evidence. I knew how to build an airtight case. But this wasn't just any fraud case. This was my wife. I could confront Celeste with everything I knew. But she was already defensive, already emotionally attached to Dominique. She'd see it as another example of my paranoia, my need to control. She'd accuse me of violating her privacy by checking her email. She'd dig in deeper. No, I needed to let Dominique reveal herself. I spent the next week preparing. I opened new bank accounts Celeste didn't know about and transferred what little remained of our accessible funds into them. I documented everything: emails, bank transfers, registration information for Laurent Capital Trust. I contacted an attorney and filed preliminary divorce paperwork, not because I wanted a divorce, but because I needed to protect whatever assets I could salvage. I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division and gave them everything Jackson had found. Then I did something risky. I called Dominique Laurent. "Mr. Mercer," she answered smoothly. "What a pleasant surprise." "I've been thinking about our meeting," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Celeste is very enthusiastic about your recommendations. I'd like to discuss them further, just the two of us, if possible. Man to man, so to speak. Or professional to professional." There was a brief pause. She was calculating whether this was a threat or an opportunity. "Of course," she said. "I appreciate your due diligence. How about tomorrow afternoon? Say, 2 o'clock at my office? Actually, I'd prefer somewhere more private. I have some questions about asset protection strategies that I'd rather discuss away from your office. Do you know Riverside Park? There's a quiet walking path along the water." Another pause. I could practically hear her weighing the options. A public park was safer than a private office, if she thought I might be confrontational. But it was also isolated enough for a serious conversation. "That works," she finally said. "I'll meet you at the north entrance at 2. I didn't tell Celeste about the meeting. The next afternoon, I drove to Riverside Park early and positioned myself where I could watch the entrance. Jackson was parked nearby with video equipment, documenting everything. Dominique arrived right on time, wearing designer yoga clothes and oversized sunglasses. She looked casual, relaxed, confident. She spotted me on a bench near the water and approached with a warm smile. "Beautiful day," she said, sitting beside me. "It is," I agreed. "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course. I understand this is a big decision. You want to make sure Celeste is in good hands." "Exactly." I turned to face her directly. "How long have you been running cons on middle-aged married women?" Her smile didn't falter, but something shifted in her eyes. "Excuse me?" "Diane Lawrence. That's your real name, isn't it? $3 million from 11 victims over 5 years. Very impressive. You're good at this." She stood up smoothly. "I don't know what you're talking about. If you're going to make baseless accusations..." "Sit down, Diane." My voice was quiet but hard. "I have documentation of every transfer. I have your real identity. I have testimony from 2 of your previous victims in Arizona and Florida. The FBI is currently obtaining a warrant for your arrest. This conversation is being recorded. So sit down and let's talk about what happens next." She sat. The mask finally slipped, and I saw the calculation behind her eyes. "Your wife made her own choices," she said coldly. "I didn't force her to do anything. No, you just manipulated her systematically over 9 months, isolated her from her support system, and convinced her to hand over our life savings. That's elder financial abuse, and it's a federal crime. She's 56, hardly elderly. The law says 55 and up qualifies. You made sure to check that before you targeted her, didn't you?" Dominique Diane leaned back on the bench, studying me. "You can't prove manipulation. She'll tell any court that I gave her sound financial advice, and she chose to follow it. She'll say that right up until I show her the evidence about your previous victims. Right up until she realizes Laurent Capital Trust is a shell company. Right up until she understands you were never planning to invest our money. Just steal it. Good luck with that." "I don't need luck. I have documentation. The FBI is tracing where the funds actually went. We both know they're sitting in offshore accounts you can access. probably in the Cayman Islands or Singapore. You're running out of time to disappear." She stood again. "This conversation is over." "One more thing," I said. "You made a mistake when you chose Celeste." "Oh?" "You assume because I'm retired I'm not paying attention. You assume because I trusted my wife I wouldn't investigate. You targeted her specifically because I'm a former fraud investigator, thinking the irony would make her less likely to believe me if I caught on." Classic overconfidence. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. "The FBI will be at your office tomorrow morning with a warrant," I continued. "You have about 18 hours before your accounts are frozen and you're arrested. If you run, they'll find you. They always do. Or," I paused, "you can return the money, all of it, to every victim, not just us. Work with the prosecutor, take a plea deal, serve reduced time instead of 20 years in federal prison." "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone and showed her an email from the FBI agent handling the case. "Am I?" She stared at the screen, and I watched the calculation happen. She was smart enough to know when the game was over. "I need to think," she said. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. After that, the decision is out of your hands." She walked away without another word. I watched her go, then nodded to Jackson in the parking lot. He'd gotten everything on video. I drove home with my hands shaking. I'd confronted hundreds of fraudsters in my career, but never one who'd stolen from my own wife. Never one who'd nearly destroyed my marriage. Celeste was in the kitchen when I arrived, chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up when I entered, her expression guarded. "We need to talk," I said. "Vincent, if this is about Dominique again." "It is. And you need to hear this." I sat at the kitchen table, suddenly exhausted. Dominique Laurent is a con artist. Her real name is Diane Lawrence. She's stolen approximately $3 million from 11 victims over the past 5 years. She targeted you specifically because of my background in fraud investigation, thinking it would make you less likely to believe me if I suspected her. Celeste set down the knife. "That's ridiculous. She's taken over $700,000 from us. Our savings, our home equity. She remortgaged our house. Laurent Capital Trust isn't an investment vehicle. It's a shell company she uses to move stolen funds offshore." "You're lying." But her voice wavered. "I wish I was." I pulled out the documents I'd prepared and laid them on the table. Bank statements, transfer records, Jackson's investigation report, photos of Diane Lawrence using different names in different cities. I confronted her this afternoon. "It's over. The FBI is moving on her tomorrow." Celeste stared at the documents, her face draining of color. She picked up one page, then another, her hands trembling. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. This can't be. Dominique was helping us. She was my friend. She understood me in ways." She stopped, and I watched the realization hit her. All those warm emails, all that validation, all that careful manipulation designed to make her feel special, understood, valued, and to isolate her from me. Oh God. She pressed her hands to her face. "Vincent, I'm so sorry. I thought you were being paranoid. I thought you didn't trust me. I thought, oh God, what did I do? Our house? Our savings? Everything we worked for? I know. How could I be so stupid? I fell for every line, every manipulation. I pushed you away. I called you controlling. Her voice broke. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was angry. But mostly I was just sad. Sad that this had happened. Sad that someone had exploited my wife's trust. Sad that our marriage had been damaged. Maybe irreparably. "We'll get through this," I said. Though I wasn't sure I believed it. Celeste looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Will we? How can you even look at me? I gave away our life savings to a con artist. I mortgaged our house behind your back. I chose to believe a stranger over my husband of 18 years. You were manipulated by a professional. That's not an excuse." She stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "You tried to warn me. You saw through her from the beginning, and I called you paranoid. I threw your first marriage in your face. I basically told you that you were the problem. I didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. She had done all those things. And words once spoken, can't be taken back. What happens now? She finally asked. Legally? I've filed a complaint with the FBI. They're pursuing the case. There's a chance we'll recover some of the money, but most of it is probably gone. I've protected what little we have left. I've also filed preliminary divorce paperwork to separate our assets and protect my pension from being claimed in any legal proceedings. You filed for divorce? Her voice was small. To protect what's left. Not because I want one, though. I paused. We have a lot to work through, Celeste. A lot of broken trust on both sides. She nodded, tears still falling. I understand if you can't forgive me. It's not about forgiveness. It's about rebuilding. And I don't know if we can. We stood in our kitchen, the one in the house we might lose, surrounded by 18 years of shared life, and I felt the weight of uncertainty settle between us. The next morning, the FBI arrested Diane Lawrence at her office. She'd tried to flee during the night, but had been stopped at the airport. In her luggage, they found documents for 3 new identities and wire transfer confirmations for moving funds to Singapore. Over the next 2 months, the investigation expanded. Diane had 13 victims, not 11. Together, they'd lost over $4 million. She'd been running variations of this scam for 7 years, not 5. And she'd been sloppy in ways that made tracking the money possible. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was exceptional. They traced 78% of the stolen funds, including most of ours. The recovery would take time, but we'd get back about $550,000. The house was more complicated. We'd have to refinance to pay off the fraudulent mortgage, but we could keep it. Financially, we'd survive. We'd have to delay Celeste's retirement by a few years. We'd need to downsize eventually, but we wouldn't lose everything. The marriage was harder to salvage. Celeste was devastated, not just by the financial loss, but by her own role in it. She'd been so thoroughly manipulated that she'd questioned her own judgment about everything. She started therapy, working through the shame and the self-recrimination. I went with her sometimes to couples counseling, trying to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. There were hard conversations about why she'd been vulnerable to Diane's manipulation in the first place, about whether she'd been happy in our marriage before Diane appeared, about my tendency to see threats everywhere, my difficulty trusting, the ways my investigative mindset sometimes made me hard to live with. I think I was lonely, Celeste admitted during one session, 6 weeks after Diane's arrest. Not lonely for company, but lonely for validation, I guess. You're so competent, Vincent. So confident in your skills and your judgment. And I'm just a librarian who manages the household budget. When Dominique Diane told me I was smart, that I had untapped potential, that I could be more than just someone's wife, it felt good to hear that. You are smart, I said. You are more than just my wife. But you never told me that. Not in those words. She looked at me with sad eyes. We got comfortable. We stopped seeing each other. She was right. Somewhere in 18 years of comfortable routine, we'd stopped really looking at each other. We'd become roommates managing a household instead of partners building a life. The therapy helped. Slowly, we started rebuilding. Not the old marriage that was gone, broken by betrayal and manipulation and words that couldn't be unsaid, but something new, more honest, more aware of each other's needs and vulnerabilities. 3 months after Diane's arrest, my daughter Elise came over for Sunday dinner. She pulled me aside while Celeste was making coffee. How are you, Dad? Really? I thought about it. Honestly, I don't know. We're working on things. Some days are good. Some days I look at her and remember what she did, what she said, and I wonder if we can ever really get past it. Are you going to stay married? I think so. But it's not the same marriage. Maybe that's okay, Elise said softly. Maybe the old marriage needed to end. Maybe this one will be better. Maybe. Diane Lawrence, her real name was actually Deanna Lawson. We discovered went to trial in October. All 13 victims testified. Celeste was the last to take the stand, and I watched her tell the story of how she'd been manipulated, isolated, and convinced to betray her own husband. She cried through most of it, but she didn't look away from Deanna, who sat at the defense table with cold, empty eyes. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, elder financial abuse, identity theft, money laundering. Deanna Lawson was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. In the courtroom that day, I watched Celeste stare at the woman who'd nearly destroyed her life. I couldn't read her expression. Relief, anger, sadness, probably all of those things. Afterward, in the parking lot, she turned to me. "I keep thinking about what Elise said last month." "What's that?" "She asked me if I thought Deanna ever actually liked me, or if it was all just manipulation. Every word, every bit of warmth." Celeste's voice was quiet, and I realized I'll never know. I'll never know if any of it was real. That's the part that hurts most, not the money. The wondering. I took her hand. It was the first time I'd reached for her in months. She squeezed my fingers. "I know one thing that's real," I said. 18 years. They were real. Whatever happens next, those years existed. Even though I almost threw them away. You made a mistake. A big one. But you're not the first person to be manipulated by a professional con artist, and you won't be the last. Do you forgive me? I thought about that question. Forgiveness is complicated. It's not a switch you flip. It's a process. A choice you make over and over, day after day. I'm working on it, I said honestly. And I think you need to work on forgiving yourself. Now, 3 months after the trial, we're still working on it, both of us. The money is being returned in stages as the federal government liquidates Deanna's assets. We're rebuilding our savings. We're refinancing the mortgage. We're attending therapy every week. And slowly, carefully, we're learning to be married again. Some people have asked me if I regret confronting Deanna. If I wish I'd handled it differently, maybe tried to get through to Celeste before things went so far. The answer is complicated. Could I have handled it better? Probably. Could I have been less paranoid, more empathetic, more willing to see Celeste's vulnerability instead of just the threat? Yes. But I also know that Deanna Lawson was very, very good at what she did. She'd been running these cons for 7 years, targeting smart, educated women and separating them from their families and their money. Celeste wasn't stupid or weak. She was human. And humans can be manipulated, especially when someone knows exactly which emotional buttons to push. I've started volunteering with a victims advocacy group for financial fraud survivors. Once a month, I lead a session for people who've been scammed, helping them understand how it happened, how to protect themselves going forward, how to deal with the shame and self-blame that comes with being conned. Last week, a woman in her 60s stood up and said, "My husband keeps asking me how I could have been so stupid, and I don't know how to answer him." I looked at her and saw Celeste sitting at our kitchen table, documents spread before her, her world falling apart. "You weren't stupid," I told her. "You were targeted by someone who spent years perfecting their craft. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human." She started crying. "He doesn't trust me anymore." Then he needs to work on that, because the person who hurt you was the con artist, not you. You were a victim, not a perpetrator. After the session, Celeste, who'd come with me, took my hand. "You're good at this," she said. "It's easier to help other people than to fix my own life." "Our life," she corrected gently. "And I think we're fixing it. Slowly." She's right. It is slow. Some days we're like strangers, carefully polite, still learning how to be around each other. Some days we're like the couple we used to be, comfortable and connected. Most days we're somewhere in between, working on building something new from the pieces of what broke. My daughter Elise asked me last week if I was happy. It's a simple question with a complicated answer. Am I happy? Not the way I was before. That uncomplicated, comfortable happiness is gone, probably forever. But I'm not unhappy either. I'm working towards something. We both are. I learned something through all of this. I spent 34 years investigating fraud, and I thought I understood deception. I thought I could spot it anywhere, recognize it in any form. But I'd been looking for the wrong kind of deception. I'd been watching for strangers with bad intentions. I'd never considered that the real threat might be my own certainty, my own inability to see my wife's vulnerability because I was too busy protecting her from external threats. Celeste learned something too. She learned that validation from strangers is empty, that real connection requires risk and honesty, and the willingness to be seen as imperfect, that the quiet, steady presence of someone who knows your flaws and chooses to stay is worth more than all the flattery in the world. Are we going to make it? I don't know. Some days I think yes, some days I'm not sure, but we're trying, and maybe that's what matters. 3 weeks ago, on a Saturday morning, I woke up early and found Celeste already in the kitchen, making pancakes the way she used to when we first got married. She looked up when I came in, and for just a moment, I saw the woman I fell in love with 20 years ago. Not the woman who got manipulated, not the woman who betrayed my trust. Just Celeste. Imperfect, human, mine. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," I replied. And for that moment, it was enough.